Translanguaging goes against this. Translanguaging reverses these processes. Translanguages, to a large degree, democratizes language use. And how does it do this? Well, it destabilizes languages as fixed categories arranged in a hierarchy of privilege. And so one could remark that translanguaging itself is probably one of the more ethical disciplines within applied linguistics. So what are the social and political effects of translanguaging? Well, translanguaging is not only about language, but it's about culture too. So think about translanguaging as simultaneously being transculturing. Translanguaging brings people together through a non-intimidating mix of culture and language. And in this sense, it allows people to share cultural knowledge. Now, there are many benefits to translanguaging, but before I go into these, I would perhaps do well to explain a certain example from my own past in teaching. There was a time when I worked with teachers as a teacher educator, and where I was expected to teach within a teaching English in English environment. Now, what I did was I actually defied this policy, because I realized that once the door is closed, that the classroom was my responsibility, and that the desires of the teachers, that I was responsible for fulfilling these desires. And so what I did was I started allowing teachers to draw on their own linguistic background, their first language, which in that case was Korean. And I also encouraged them to really bring cultural artifacts to the class and to really make the class their own. While it didn't take too long for teachers to accept this invitation. And within weeks, I could actually see a big change in teachers and the way that they engaged with the English classes. Firstly, teachers experienced an increase in confidence. And once they experienced the increase in confidence, it wasn't long before I started seeing that they became even more motivated to attend classes and to do the work. Well, once they were motivated, it wasn't long to see that they were really putting in a lot of effort into the classes because they found them meaningful. And it wasn't long after that before I could actually see tangible degrees of growth within the English teachers' proficiency levels. And so in that class, there was not only the increase in language proficiency, but also teachers experienced these classes as working to affirm their cultural backgrounds. So there are two overriding advantages to translanguaging. The first is that translanguaging allows for the scaffolding of English learning. It is a means that we can employ in order to get students to learn language in personally relevant ways. A second advantage to translanguaging is that it cultivates intercultural respect and competence. Now, there are many different ways that we can use translanguaging in a classroom, and it certainly is beyond the purvey of this lesson to discuss all of these. However, I would like to briefly highlight just a few of them. Multilingual word walls is one example. In other words, in the classroom, making sure that on the walls, different languages, those languages that represent the student population of the class, that these languages are represented. Also, bilingual dictionaries in the classroom. These can be very useful. Reading thematically in multiple languages is one other translanguaging technique. And of course, drawing from multilingual forms of multimedia is yet another. Now, I'd like you to imagine some very practical, common day scenarios in which translanguaging practices can be very useful. Imagine that there's a student who's perhaps at an advanced beginner level of English proficiency, and this student is engaging with a math problem. Now, we know the student can do the mathematics. The problem is that the math problem is a word problem. And so the student does not necessarily grasp or understand the meaning of each and every word. In a situation like this, the use of a bilingual dictionary becomes very, very practical. Or imagine another situation. Imagine there are a group of English language learners in a classroom engaged in preparing for a task or an activity, and yet the time is limited. Now, what do you do as a teacher? I mean, we all realize that when we work with English language learners, we often run out of time in classes. We're often under time pressure. Well, here's one suggestion using translanguaging, and that is to suggest to students that while they prepare or practice the activity, that they are welcome to draw from various languages, that they are welcome to flow between various languages, their first language, the target language, but that when they present the activity, that they present that activity in English. Now, one of the advantages is that as a teacher, we need not have a knowledge of all the languages of the students in our class, because students naturally draw on their home language and their background languages in the classroom. Also, translanguaging decenters the native speaker privilege that is often associated with a teacher. And in doing so, it leads to greater social equality and equilibrium. Suddenly, the English teacher is not the only resource within the classroom. The English teacher is not the authority. Instead, the English teacher is but one resource from which students draw, their home backgrounds and their home contexts and their home languages being another. Now, just a point of clarity. Translanguaging is not a free-for-all. We have a target language to learn, and in our context, that target language is English. We want to encourage students to learn English. Unfortunately, there is this misconception that often prevails where people will come and say, well, translanguaging, but don't students need to learn a language? Well, that's the whole point. To sum up, Ophelia Garcia has the following to say.
Rather than focusing on the language itself and how one or the other might relate to the way in which a monolingual standard is used and has been described, the concept of translanguaging makes obvious that there are no clear-cut borders between the languages of bilinguals. What we have is a languaging continuum that is accessed.
So you may be interested in reading a little more about translanguaging. There are many resources I could point you to. One of them is this book over here, and is the book Translingual Practice, Global Englishes and Cosmopolitan Relations by Dr. Suresh Kanagaraja. In fact, this particular publication won the British Association of Applied Linguists Award just last year. Imagine the power and the potential and the possibility that translanguaging affords you as a language teacher. Imagine a student leaving your class and thinking, you know what, my teacher really cares about me. My teacher really cares about my home background and the culture from which I come. Your homework for today is to think carefully about how you can introduce and incorporate translanguaging practices into your teaching in future. Thank you, take care, and bye-bye.